Hello, and welcome to Magic for Not-So-Dummies. It has been a while since we did Magic for Dummies, but finally we are back at it and doing stuff. So for this video, I'm just going to do a bot match. Actually, first we'll go into the cards again and just take a look at, you can see I have a ton of decks. My fiance says I have a problem because there are just so many decks I like to play. Anyway, alright, so the first thing we're going to talk about is creature abilities. So all creatures have, or can have, some sort of ability, or can be given some sort of ability. So right here we see one. It says create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. And then it shows you the knight token with vigilance, 2/2. And then over to the right of that it says adventure. You may cast this as an adventure because it says Rider in Need for 3 mana, which lets you create the token with vigilance, or and then after you cast it for 3, you can then cast it again for 5, and it's a 3/3 with vigilance. It's not a very good card. It's just one that I saw with vigilance. But then to the right, it also explains what vigilance is. Attacking doesn't cause a creature with vigilance to tap. So that's a creature ability, and it's an ability both of those creatures have. So there are quite a few abilities. There is Lifelink. Lifelink says that when any damage is dealt by this creature, you gain that much life. Death Touch says any damage dealt to a creature kills that creature. It is a touch of death. Trample says any damage you have past the toughness of a creature rolls over and hits your opponent. So if you're attacking with a creature that's attacking for 7 and a creature with 4 defense is blocking, 3 of that damage is going to go over and hit your opponent. Haste means that it doesn't have summoning sickness, so a creature can attack the first turn it hits the board. First strike means that if I have a 4/4 first strike and you have a 4/4, my creature is going to deal the damage to your creature before your creature damages mine. So my creature is going to kill yours before yours can kill mine. Double strike is the same thing. If I have a 4/4 double strike and you have a 4/4 regular, my first strike is going to hit you. Actually, if you have a 5/5, we'll say I have a 4/4 double strike, you have a 5/5. I'm going to hit you for 4 first. Then I'm going to hit you for 4, and you're going to hit me for 5. So I get to hit for that 4 2 times. Flying is pretty self-explanatory. The creature is flying, which means that it cannot be blocked by a creature without flying or reach. Reach says you can block creatures with flying. Then we have hexproof, means that this creature cannot be targeted by your opponent. So if your opponent has deal 2 damage to target creature card, they can't deal that damage to that creature because it has hexproof. Menace means that the creature cannot be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. So if you have a 1/1 and I have a 1/1 with Menace, you can't block because you have to block with 2 creatures. And there are other cards that can affect that now in Standard. There's one that says a creature with Menace you control has to be blocked by 3 creatures. It's Menace is becoming a thing. And then Protection. Protection is, it means it can't be targeted, can't be damaged, can't be really affected by whatever it has protection against. So there's a Stone Coil Serpent. We'll go look at that. And I don't have any because I'm poor. Alright, so it has protection from multicolored. So anything that has 2 or more mana symbols in it, a plains and a mountain, a forest and a plains, a swamp and a mountain, any combination of colors cannot target Stone Coil Serpent. A red can target it. If you have just a red burn spell, that can target it. If you have just a blue, that can target it, but any combination of colors can't target it because it has protection. We can look at if I can type tonight. So right here, target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. So we'll go deeper into the stack either in this video or the next video. Um, but you cast this, say on this creature. Well, sure, on this creature. So this creature enters, you choose odd or even. So let's say you chose odd. And now an even mana cost spell is trying to kill the Lava Brink Venturer. Well, you can give it God's Willing and protect it from that color, from whatever color is being cast at it. Okay, that's protection. That's most of the at least standard abilities right now. There have been other abilities in the past. So if you're looking to get into standard right now, this video is going to be great. If you're looking to get into older stuff, um, there's a lot of abilities, a lot of creature abilities, and I would have to make a whole video on all the creature abilities there's ever been, and it would be very long. Okay, so next we're going to talk about instants and sorceries. So in the last video we talked about permanents. This is a permanent, this is permanent, 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 permanent. Anything that stays on the battlefield when you cast it is a permanent. Instants and sorceries are not. So after you cast this, it goes to the graveyard. Anytime you cast an instant or sorcery, it goes to the graveyard, unless some rule dictates otherwise. So there's a red white creature that says if you target a creature, feather, here he is. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a creature you control, exile that card instead of putting it into the graveyard. If you do, return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. So you cast God's Willing on feather, and it says don't put God's Willing in the graveyard, put it in exile, and then at the end of your turn, put it back in your hand. There are not many effects like that, and I believe this is the only one that's standard that's like that. But for the most part, instants will go directly to the graveyard and sorceries. So now the difference between instants and sorceries can be cast on your main step. Instants can be cast anytime, unless an effect prevents it. So there are certain effects that prevent you from being able to cast right here. Each opponent can cast spells only anytime they could cast a sorcery. So during your main phase. So Teferi kind of counter magic. Counter target spell with converted mana cost 4 or greater. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 4. And remember from the first video, anything is a spell if it's not land. Land cannot be countered because it's just part of your turn. Okay, now we're going to talk about some planeswalker abilities. So we'll just go in here and hit planeswalker. We're not going to cover all of them because as you can see, there are a lot. But we'll just cover the different rarities. So we'll start with common and uncommon. I don't believe there are any common right now. No, there aren't. So these are all uncommon. You can see the little silver symbol next to all of their names. It says Legendary Planeswalker Ashiok, little silver symbol. And again, that symbol tells you what set it's from and what its rarity is. Most of the uncommon planeswalkers only have a minus ability. So -1, discard a card. -2, create a token. But they don't have a positive ability. This Chandra is the only one that has a positive ability. The only uncommon that has more than one ability. All these others only have one thing they can do. And again, I'm not going to go through them all because that could be a whole other video. Okay, now the rares typically have a plus and a minus. So, and the minus is called the ultimate, except on this Chandra, because -2 is not an ultimate. Anything you can do the turn you cast it is not an ultimate, only if you build to it. So Ugin, -3 is not an ultimate. Karn, -2 is not an ultimate. So there are some rares that just don't have ultimates. Jace, this is an ultimate because you have to +1 4 times before you can -8. So on the Planeswalkers, it's really just about reading the cards to see what they do. Nissa is a very popular one, has been for really since it came out. So +1, put 3 counters on a land that's not a creature. It becomes a creature with 3 counters on it. And then she has a passive ability that says whenever you tap a forest for mana, add an additional green, an additional forest. Teferi is the one we already talked about. Opponents can only cast spells anytime they could cast a sorcery. And then you can +1 and say you can cast sorceries as though they were instants. So it says as though they had flash. Flash is another mechanic, creature mechanic that I forgot to talk about earlier. So flash means that you can cast it at instant speed anytime. It doesn't have to be during your main phase. And then Teferi's -3, his -3 is return a creature, artifact, or enchantment to its owner's hand and draw a card. Teferi is also very common. It's in pretty much all of the top decks right now. And then we've got others like Tamiyo. So all of these have a passive ability also, except for Chandra. Yeah, just Chandra. So Tamiyo says spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause you to discard cards or sacrifice permanents. +1, you choose a card name, so you have to know the names of the cards in your deck. You say the card name you want, and then you put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard. If that card is in there, you put it in your hand instead. Then you can -3 to return a card from your graveyard to your hand. Again, that's not an ultimate because you can do it the turn Tamiyo comes out. Okay, so now we're going to talk about can't overrules can. So let's say you and your opponent both have Teferi out, and you hit your +1, thinking, okay, now I can counter something on their turn, or do something on their turn, because my ability says, until your next turn, you may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. But can't overrides can, and in fact, negative overrides positive. So it's not just the word can't, it's just anything negative overrides anything positive. So if you have a card that says you win the game, but your opponent has a card that says you can't lose the game, they can't lose the game. So you don't win the game. So in the Teferi instance, at that point, if you both have Teferi, you can both only cast things during your turn, during your main phase. Alright, and now I'm just going to jump into a game and show a little bit about phases. Okay, so I can keep this hand. So this land, we haven't talked about any land abilities really. As it enters the battlefield, you can pay 2 life to make it come in untapped. If you don't, it enters tapped. I want it to enter tapped because I have nothing in my hand that I can cast for 1 mana. And I didn't look closely enough at my lands. I should have played this one first, because it's guaranteed to come in tapped, instead of something that I could bring in untapped. So I still don't have anything I can cast for 2, so I wasn't punished there. But if I had had a spell I could cast for 2, then I have to wait to cast this, or to put my land in, until I don't need that particular land at that time. So now I'm going to cast Uro. Uro says, when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escaped. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you gain 3 life and draw a card. Then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So I'm going to cast it because I want to gain 3 life. I'm going to draw a card. Then I'm going to put a land in. I'm not going to pay life. And then I sacrifice it because I didn't escape with it. Escape is a new mechanic from this set. It's not necessarily a creature ability because there are instant sorceries, all sorts of stuff that has escape. So to escape something that's in the graveyard, you pay whatever the cost is and exile however many cards it says from your graveyard. And then it escapes and becomes a creature on the battlefield. I'm just going to play another Uro. Gain 3 more life, draw another card. I'm going to also do this, draw a card and put a land. So if I draw a land, I get to put it on the battlefield right away. So this deck's purpose is to get out Shark Typhoon and then cast non-creatures. That's pretty much everything this deck is trying to do. And I can cast it right now, but I don't think it's the right time. I need to first see if my opponent has an answer for enchantments. Okay, so right here's a good time to talk about phases. So right now I just entered my end step, which is indicated by the final part here. It says at the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. That's an ability of this enchantment. So before that happens, I want to tap this for green during my end step, then let that resolve so it untaps all my land. Then I can growth spiral again, and it only really cost me 1 blue mana. Now if I pass, it ends my turn. Goes to the opponent's upkeep and draw step. So during upkeep and draw, you untap, see how he's attacking, and tapped. It has a little tap symbol on it. It turns slightly. In Paper Magic, you typically turn it 90 degrees or so. Unless you're running out of board space, then most people just go 45. But the game shows you the little tap symbol. So during your upkeep, you untap, draw a card, and during your upkeep, instants can still be cast. I keep clicking here to put a stop on my end step, so that if I want to interact with my land before my turn ends, I can do that. I should have showed you right there. So when I casted that, it popped up like this. I have 2 options. That's because this card has, so the ability on it, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. Converted mana cost is 6 on the shark, 4 on Storm's Wrath, 2 and 2 red, 2 on negate, 1 and 1 blue, 3 on Uro, because it looks like 4, but if you actually look at the card, it's 3. 4 is its escape cost. So when it's down here, it's showing me its escape cost, but it's really 3 converted mana. However, it's not a non-creature, it is a creature, so it doesn't trigger Shark Typhoon. But then the second ability says I can cycle it for X, 1, and blue. And when I do cycle it, I create an XX blue shark creature token with flying. So cycling means I'm going to discard this shark and then draw a card. I'm going to discard this enchantment right here and draw a card. And on this particular one, you can do that ability, pay X, and 2 mana, 1 having to be blue. So, but I don't think there's anything I want to do on my end step. Yes, there is. Okay, so now we've gone to end step again. This ability has triggered. So we're going to tap these for 2 blue, then we're going to let that resolve, and then we're going to use Castle Vantress. I can tap it to add a blue mana, or I can pay 4 and tap it to scry 2. So effectively, I'm only paying 3 because I got 2 from before Wilderness Reclamation untapped. Blast Zone is actually pretty good here. Scry means, we haven't gone over Scry either. This is why you play a game in the video. Okay, so scry means you look at the top however many cards it says. So in this case it says scry 2. So I look at the top 2. I decide if I want them on the top of the deck or on the bottom of the deck, and in what order. So if I wanted to keep this, I could have put it here or here. So I think Black Sparky Bot just runs a lot of creature destroy, which is fine because we're not playing creatures typically. We just want to play Shark Typhoons and get giant sharks on the field. And now if I had 1 more mana during my main phase, I could have casted this sorcery and dealt 4 damage to everything. It wouldn't have killed this shark and would have killed both of their creatures. Alright, so also Blast Zone is another activated ability land. I can tap it to add a colorless mana, or I can pay XX and tap it to put X charge counters on it, and then I can pay 3 and tap it to sacrifice it and destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters. So right now it has 1 charge counter, so if I sacrifice it right now, it'll destroy everything with a 1 cost. So I'm going to do that because I want to kill this Death Touch guy. I didn't really need to do that because I'm going to Storm's Wrath this turn anyway, which is going to kill all of their creatures. The only reason I did it like that is because I need to show what the land does, what Blast Zone does. So that's called an activated ability. So a triggered ability is going to happen right now. I cast this, then these triggered abilities go on the stack, and I choose the order they go on the stack. They're the same ability, so it doesn't matter. So since I'm casting Storm's Wrath that deals 4 damage to each creature in Planeswalker, my Shark Typhoon builds 2 4/4s who die to my Storm's Wrath. So we're going to talk just a little bit about the stack right now. Okay, so he wants to disfigure my shark and deal 2 damage to it. Okay, maybe he knows I have a counter, but I'm going to go ahead and use my counter anyway and counter this so I can get 2 more sharks out. I knew he had some creature destruction in there. He had to have, because he wasn't doing anything. Okay, again, we get to the end step. We untap lands. There's not really anything I need to do. At this point, our opponent can't really pick back up. Okay, we got another Blast Zone. So this, when it enters the battlefield, that's also a triggered effect. Something happened that triggered something else to happen. So now I'm going to escape it from the graveyard using this ability, which means I need to exile 5 things from my graveyard. And in my deck, it doesn't matter what I exile. I just don't want them to be permanents necessarily, because I do have a way to get permanents back out of the graveyard and put them into my hand. And again, I don't really have anything I want to do. So this here is an activated ability because I have to do something to affect it. Escape is an activated ability. Uro entering is a triggered ability. So triggers, triggered ability. So I'm just going to attack with Uro so I get the trigger for the draw. So I'm going to deal 3 damage to this shark so I can get 2 more 2/2 sharks. Again, that's not something you would ever do in a game because it's an instant. So you could do it on their turn if they play a creature. He's just so far behind he can't come back. Okay, so before blocks happen, actually I'm not going to do that either. I'm going to let him decide whether he wants to block. He does not. So again, right now we're in my main phase, which is why I can cast an enchantment, which is why I can cast anything. So we attack, we tap our creature, we get the effect, damage happens, and then if you were playing against somebody who's not a bot, since both of these are instants, you would not play them until the opponent does whatever they're going to do. Okay, I think we'll have a chance to talk about the stack here. So I'm going to just enter full control. Okay, no, we're not. I'm not sure why the opponent attacked. So we're just going to give the creature a couple turns to re-stabilize. So I'm just passing my turn. I want him to have a creature and then have something that can either protect his creature or allow me to protect one of my creatures. Alright, so I'm just going to show the stack. So right now I'm just tapping all my mana. So first I'm going to opt. Okay, and now look at the stack. I wish there was a better way to examine the whole stack. Okay, so I'm still in my end step. So on the stack is Wilderness Reclamation, untap all lands. Then another trigger of untap all lands. Then I casted, which triggered Shark Typhoon and Shark Typhoon. And you can kind of see them down there at the bottom of the screen. They're glowing when I mouse over the trigger. Okay, so now if I opt again before this resolves, it's all going to happen the same. So whenever something is cast, it goes on the top of the stack. So it resolves like you're building a sandwich is the way I was told. So in my case, wilderness reclamation is my bottom piece of bread. The other one is, I don't know, bonus bread. Then my opt is a piece of cheese. I don't have to simplify it that much, I don't think. So then the Shark Typhoon triggers. Then I casted another opt. So everything went on the stack above everything else. And then the order it resolves is top to bottom. So if my opponent had a counter spell, they're running black, so they can't have a counter spell. But if they had a counter spell, they could play it right now and counter this opt, which goes, since it's the most recent thing cast, it goes on the top of the stack, way above my opt, and it resolves before my opt. So it resolves, counters opt, opt never happens. So we've got Storm's Wrath. We're going to let it auto pay 4. We're going to let it build our sharks, resolve, resolve, and then we're going to pretend that my opponent casted this. Okay, so he targets Storm's Wrath, and then because I actually targeted it, I get 2 sharks. But he targets Storm's Wrath. So Storm's Wrath is on the bottom of the stack. All my Shark Typhoon triggers went on top. They all resolved back down. My opponent, Disdainful Stroked, he countered my Storm's Wrath, which goes on top of the stack, eliminates Storm's Wrath, and now Storm's Wrath doesn't happen. So that's a pretty basic way of explaining the stack. So it does take a little bit of getting used to the game and reading, but that's really all it is. The biggest thing to remember about the reading part is can't always overrides can. So actually, I'll give you another example of can't overrides can. Platinum Angel. You can't lose the game, and your opponents can't win the game. So that's 2 can'ts. So if you can find a way to make this indestructible and um, hexproof, and then you never attack or do anything with it, you actually can't lose the game, and your opponent can't win the game. You can draw all your cards, you can lose the game in every way possible, but this card says you can't actually lose the game. Really fun one to play in Historic. All right, that's going to wrap up Magic for Not-So-Dummies. I hope you learned a lot. Hope I'm helping. And if you like, you can come ask questions on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Dave Gala Gaming. And I'm pretty good at answering questions as they come in. Thanks for tuning in. And if you like the info, subscribe. All right, have a good one.